Hello and welcome back to the Rooted Elemental channel. My name is She, and in this video I'm going to talk about my experience at an Air Force base on the western coast of Florida. And this Air Force base played a part in a group abduction experience that I experienced earlier on in my life. In this particular base, I later found out, many years later, when I began my research, that it is actually a hub for child trafficking. And so, when I recalled the experience that I'm about to tell you, when I started to recall this, and then I got the information that I was getting through research, it all made sense, and it was really just a confirmation. But what I'm about to tell you is a very disturbing story. And it's hard to tell the story. It's even hard to think about. But it involves me and my handler, who is a representative of the group that I'm with. For some reason, we ended up at this base for some event. I don't know if my handler was doing something covertly, and I was there as his child because, again, this was this is a hub for some pretty nefarious things that take place, or that was taking place there at that location. So this particular time, I found myself in the receptionist area with my handler, who was seated separately on a separate chair from three other adults who were sitting together on these large, like, lounge type sofas, armless sofas. And there was a carpeted area with some toys for children. And I was sitting there with a little boy, and we were playing. I believe I was playing with blocks, and he had like some sort of car or truck. And to describe him, he had blonde hair. He was a Caucasian child with blue or green eyes. Just a kind little boy. He seemed to be just very controlled or well-behaved. And the sitting area where we were, there were three adults on that sofa area that was facing that space. And so we were sitting there playing, and I'm about 5 or so. I feel like I was 5 years old, 4 or 5. And this is around the same time that I experienced a group abduction that took place on a back lot at this Air Force base. And there's another video in which I talk about that abduction experience. So please check that out to get a full picture of what's going on. So we're just sitting there, and there's 2 women and 1 male as a party of that group of 3 adults. And one of them was a red-haired woman who looked just like Barbra Streisand, but she looked really evil. Her hair looked like it was like that fake or cheap red dye, some horrible, and it was like this semi-curly afro thing, but really beady eyes, and she just looked really evil. And I remember her leaning forward and taking a sharp object. I want to say it's a pen, but it looked like it could have been something else. Some kind of sharp object. And I remember her sitting forward, leaning forward, and then poking the little boy in his right arm, and poking him viciously, like he wasn't even alive, like he wasn't even a human. Just poking him like with full force. 3 times she jabbed him in his arm, and he didn't fall over, but he motioned over away from her, but he didn't really fully move. He was just like, he registered what happened, and that she hurt him, but and I feel like he looked over at her, but kind of like looked down at the ground, like he was just terrified. Or this is something that he has been forced to tolerate or something like that. It was really bizarre because, you know, a child would normally get up and run or move away, but he didn't. Maybe he felt like he couldn't, or he, you know, or whatever it was. But when I saw this, I was enraged. I mean, from my bowels, I was enraged. I became really upset. So upset. You know how you just get so upset where the only thing you can do is cry because there's so many emotions just surging through your mind and your body? I was livid. I was just so upset. I started crying. I said, "You stop that, you stop that, you stop that." And I swung like to swat at her hand, to swat the object out of her hand. And I stood between her and him. And I think what destroyed me the most was his response. Like, he didn't even get up and move. He didn't even cry. He just like looked over and looked down to the ground. Like, he looked over to her direction, and his arm, like his shoulder, kind of like tipped in, right? And he looked over and then looked down like he was terrified to make eye contact, and he didn't even move. And that's what triggered me. And so I started screaming and I said, "You stop that, you stop that." And I looked her in her eyes, and she didn't say anything to me. She didn't say anything to me. And she stopped for the moment. And then I looked at my guy and he looked at me. And I looked at her again, and she stopped, and she didn't even give me any evil energy, like in her eye or anything. So then I sat down, and he moved over a little from her, and we were still sitting in a close proximity, but there was a wall there with like books and other toys. And so we moved a little closer to that area. And then, so we're playing, and he seemed to like, he just seemed to snap back into like feeling normal, I guess, or feeling unaffected. And then a short time later, she leaned forward because she wasn't that close to him anymore because we had moved a little bit. And she scowled at him in the most guttural, low-toned, demonic voice, and was just, she was just verbalizing these evil fucking tones directed at him. And it was like she was, now that I think of it, like, I feel like she was grooming him to be fearful or submissive or whatever. I felt like that was a tactic that she was using now. But at the time, oh my God, when she did that, I got up again and I got in her face and I screamed at her. I said, "You leave him alone. You leave him alone. You stop it." And this time I'm hysterical. I'm just all out hysterical. I'm inconsolable because the level of evil coming from this adult targeted to a child was just, I couldn't process it. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. And so I'm hysterical, and my guy's looking at me. He's like, calm down. And he waved me over, and I just couldn't. I just couldn't leave. I couldn't leave the proximity of where the little boy was. I felt like it was such a horrible feeling to witness something like that. Some people grow up in homes like that, households like that, or they've been in the foster care system where they've experienced horrible levels of abuse. But this was something that I had never, it's not that I haven't heard of people being cruel to children, but when you're there in 3D and you see a grown woman targeting a defenseless child who had no parents, because these people were not his parents, they just had him. Somehow they acquired him. And whatever he had been tolerating or being treated as, this had been going on for some time because he was programmed in a certain way. Like, now that I think back, I can see that his behavior and his responses, he was groomed and programmed to be susceptible. And he seemed like such a sweet little boy. And I just kept thinking about how that was so problematic, how this woman had so much vitriol for this innocent child. And so I was upset. And like I said, I yelled at her, and then I went over to sit with my handler, and I was just inconsolable. I was just inconsolable. And he told me to calm down. Now, I'm not sure what his role was there. I feel like he was, like I said, that he was we were there as part of some sort of covert operation, or we were there observing, or he was undercover, and it was just the child that he was presenting, because whatever this undercover, like, underground child trafficking thing that was going on at this facility, I was supposed to be the cover, and I think he really wanted me to calm down because I was so brazen. The way that I responded to this woman could have been a problem. It could have been an indication that I was not a child that had been groomed or programmed. So that's likely the reason why I was told to calm down, or else there could have been, it just could have been realized that something was wrong with us. But I've told this story before, and normally when I tell it, I become really emotional. Because, when I first got into a lot of this research, and you hear about the tunnels that they find these children in, a lot of times they find the children in conditions to where, like, they're either dead or dying because of what's happened to them. And it just makes me think about being a child and how a child is so vulnerable. And whenever a child is scared, the smallest amount of fear that a child will feel, how they'll call out for their mom, right? You have a nightmare or something like that, and you call out for your mother because your mom is there. And then I think about these children that have called out for their mothers or their fathers, and nobody was there, nobody came, no one was going to come for them. And so when you get into that research and you hear about these things, how many children that this is happening to, how long this has gone on, how many children were murdered in the British Isles, how many children ended up on that estate, I believe it's in the Netherlands, where children were hunted like game, like wild game. There was a young woman who came forward who spoke about how she was trafficked and how children were brought to this estate. I believe it was in the Netherlands, this rich person's estate, and in the evenings, how they would release the kids out on the property, and there would be men there, like, hunting them like they were deer, literally hunting them. Like, these were their hunting trips, were to hunt children. Or the account of dozens and dozens and dozens of bodies, the bodies of black children were dumped in some forest in England somewhere. And you have to wonder, when you hear this stuff and you learn about these things, I mean, for me, it took me out. It took me out for weeks. And it just, you hear about it and you can't unhear it. You can't unsee the pictures. And it's like it changes you chemically. It really does do a job to you. And so now, like when I think back about this story, there's a great deal of guilt and there's a great deal of sorrow and for not knowing what happened to this little boy. And then I came across the Rabbi Finkelstein radio interview where he talked about how the Jews see white people as their enemies and how they abduct their children, hundreds of thousands of their children, and bleed them for their matzo balls. And then they take the bodies of these children and process their bodies in these fast food meat processing warehouses. And he said, the slaves are eating their own children. But the part that gets me is that when I look back on this memory, when I reevaluate this memory, that woman looked just like Barbra Streisand, who was Jewish. And the boy was clearly Anglo-Saxon. And it dawned on me that that's why she was doing that to him. That's why she was jabbing him full force. That's why she was doing that, because she hated him. This child, this little boy, she hated him because he was an Anglo. And this is what they do to children. This is what some of them do to children. And I mean, there have been documentaries, like people have talked about how a lot of these churches are fronts for Satanism, and how a lot of these people have children in secret, and then they murder the children, or they acquire these Anglo children and they do these horrible things to them. So that kind of, after all of the information that came to me and that settled in, it really just did a job on me for a while. I mean, I'm telling you, learn this stuff, the darker stuff, because I have no resignation with this information. I have no resignation with child torture, none of that stuff. The only thing I had a past life experience, and that video will be released in the Facebook group, in the private Facebook group. But that took place a very long time ago, and it's not part of this machine in which, the child trafficking and that sort of thing. But I have no resignation with that and the things that are going on now. So to hear about this stuff is just, it's really, it's so dark that, you can't wrap your mind around it. Because and even the reptilian thing, like people talk about these reptilians. I mean, I know of a reptilian species that is not here, but it's nothing like what people are saying at all. For me personally, and I've been places and I know things and I'm in the know. And a lot of this stuff seems like canned, commercialized rhetoric regarding reptilians, because I have no, I've never seen them in these facilities. They've never come to me. I am aware of a group, but they're not even here. They're not on this plane. And they're nothing like what we're being told. So, so some of these things I've just never resonated with. But this situation here with this little boy, it's a great deal of guilt that I felt, especially that he was left there with them. And I try not to imagine what happened to him or, what the end result was. So that's what happened. Now, as far as myself and my handler, I don't remember what else came out of that, but I know we were there together and we were there for a reason. And, you know, because a lot of what we're doing here is observing. Much of what's being done here is for observation. And which is what I said in my About Me. There's not a lot we can do here, children like me, because this isn't our place. This isn't our vibration. You know, we don't really resonate with the kind of things that go on here. A lot of us don't have children. A lot of us don't come from traditional human family stock. You know, there might be one adult, you know, coming up that you may have connected with, and it may not be a traditional type of situation. So, you know, nothing is really regular with us. So there's a lot about this place and this situation that just is not normal. So we're just really just observing. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's more that we're doing, but for the most part it's observation. So thanks so much for tuning in for this video. And again, yeah, thanks for watching. And if you feel like this video may help someone else, please share it. But I'll see you in the next video. Thanks so much. Take care.